is the Happy Scientist Podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happy scientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Kenneth Vogt. Now, typically, I would be joined with my favorite happy scientist, Dr. Nick Oswald. But today we have a special guest, Sarah Farrell. So, Sarah, I will let you introduce yourself, and then we will jump into our topic today about what it's like to have crutches. Go ahead, Sarah.
So, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the business development manager here at Bitesize Bio. I'm a biotechnologist by background. I've spent a year working in a formulations lab in FMCG industry. And then following on from that, I spent 12 years working in recruitment. So I've spent a lot of time chatting to scientists about what makes them happy and what makes them unhappy.
Exactly. So I hope you will find some useful input from Sarah on this topic today. I'm sure you will. So let me just go straight into what we're talking about. We're talking about, are you leaning on a crutch? And you might think, well, why would I be leaning on a crutch? Well, there's lots of good reasons to lean on a crutch. It can provide you help and support, and it can help you in situations where you've developed routines, or you have workarounds, or literally support systems to do what you need to get done. The problem is sometimes we over-rely on that crutch. So in my own personal example, you've heard me comment on before, I had a stroke several years ago now. Boy, it seems like a long time. And I walk with a cane, usually. Not always, but usually. Can I walk without it? Yes, I can. Do I like to? Not really. Because it does provide me with some safety and some security. And, you've probably heard people say something like, oh, you're leaning on that like as a crutch. And we say that as a negative. And people turn to things like alcohol and drugs as crutches, right? Well, that's a bad way to do that. But that doesn't mean that every crutch is bad. Sometimes you're on a medication because it's helping you. Yeah. The same thing with me with a cane. I do try to walk without it because that does help me get stronger. But in the short run, it's just safer to not go without the cane. Now, when you look at yourself, you might say, well, I don't have any conditions like that. I don't know how this would apply to me. Well, here's how it applies. Do you do things like always check in with a colleague before you make a decision, to the point where you can't make a decision without getting somebody else's approval? Are there certain tasks you just regularly avoid because you can get away with it, but in that avoidance, there's costs. There are things that slow you down. Or have you developed habits that just feel safe, so you stick with them, but you know that it's coming at a cost. You know that it's limiting you. It's holding you back. So those are the kind of crutches I'm talking about, not the physical ones, but the behavioral ones that may be affecting you. So we're going to take this apart. We're going to look at the value of crutches. We're going to look at when it's time to take a look at them and how to let go of them. So if we go back in our own lives, I don't know about the rest of you, but in my own childhood, I had a tricycle. And a tricycle is great, stable, and a lot of fun, and I loved it. But when I saw those two-wheeler bikes, boy, I really wanted to have one. And I begged my parents, get me one, get me a bicycle, I want a bicycle. Well, my parents decided, well, we can get him a bicycle, but he's got to have training wheels. I did not want the training wheels. My dad got that bicycle home, and back then you had to build it yourself. It came in pieces. So he put it all together for me, and he put the training wheels on. I was so excited to get on that bike and try it. I got out there and I started riding around. It was great. And I thought I had learned how to ride a two-wheel bike because I was riding a two-wheel bike, except I was riding a two-wheel bike with training wheels. Begged him to take those wheels off. So he did. I got on there and I realized I can't even hold this bike upright, let alone start riding it. I had no idea how much I was relying on this. And so that's what happens to us sometimes. We realized that we needed a little help, right? And so we use something for that purpose. But there's a point when you just no longer need the help. When you've become competent enough, good enough, capable enough that it's time to let it go. And then it becomes a hindrance. It's actually in the way. So I will toss that out at you, Sarah. I'd put you on a spot here. Can you imagine a scenario in a lab where you've got some kind of crutch that you're leaning on that is helpful at the beginning, and then it starts to be in the way? Have you ever had an experience like that comes to mind?
I mean, definitely when I worked in a lab, there were things like we had technicians that would make up standard solutions for us. Or, you might have a mole calculations poster on the wall that you would keep going and referring back to. And you know how to make a molar calculation, but you kind of go back to that. It's interesting that you mentioned the training wheels because, as you know, Ken, I've got a 6-year-old. And we outsourced the idea of training him to ride a bike. I took the easy way out and paid someone to coach him on riding a bike. But it was interesting that we used a balance bike rather than a bike with training wheels. And the instructor said to me that that's what they advise all children now to do. They never advise stabilizers. They advise a balance bike because they need to learn to get their balance before they can start pedaling. So yeah, I think I don't know, there's a metaphor in there somewhere for,
Sure. Well, I mean, I think what you pointed out there is we see the value of some kind of stabilization in whatever we're doing, right? And whether it's referring to the poster on the wall or it's following a protocol that's been laid out for us. At some point, though, you start to realize, okay, this is made for somebody that is a neophyte, somebody that doesn't truly know what they're doing. And at some point, you know better yourself. You know what's safe and you know what's not safe. And you know what will contaminate your experiment, for instance, and what will keep it clean. And you can follow your own guidance at that point. And we want to do it that way. Otherwise, it slows us down. At some point, even your PI, the boss in your lab is going to get tired of you going slow because you're being overly cautious all the time. That's costly for you in your career, and you don't want to get caught up in that. So let me dig into where do these crutches show up for you? Now, I just mentioned something, but the idea is making a self-examination of your habits and routines, and recognizing why you put them in place. There may be good reasons why you put in place the habits that you have, right? They had some value. They offered some protection. But if you realize that a habit or a routine is starting to limit your growth, I can't really take this to the next level. I can't do level 2 work when I'm using level 1 standards, right? Well, that's when you need to break out and get to that next place. So where does that show up? Well, first off, it could be as simple as your daily habits. It may not even have to do with what you're doing explicitly at the bench. It may happen before that. And if you're slowing yourself down with, well, I get everything set up perfect first. Perfect is the enemy of good. It often does not need to be perfect. Perfect is useful. It's good. But if good enough is good enough, then that's good enough. And that's a tough concept for some folks. Some folks are very detail oriented and very leaning toward perfectionism, and it kind of hurts a little bit to not be perfect. But not everything can be done perfect. There's an expression: if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And if we just knee jerk believe that, we would have to deny most of our life experience, because that it's just plain not true. Some things are frankly not worth doing right, or at least not so perfectly right that it inhibits you. What that ends up costing you is confidence. You're now relying on the system instead of relying on your own experience and your own observation. And observation, of course, is a huge deal in science. You need to be good at that, and you can't be relying on structure or protocol to provide you with that clarity. You got to bring it to the table. That's part of why you are valuable in a lab. Now, another area where a crutch could show up is in your decision-making processes. That is, how do you choose what to do next, how to do what you do? And if it always involves circling back and always involves bringing in people that aren't necessarily involved, if it always involves I've got to check I've got to check the manual. You need to have some knowledge of the manual and some knowledge of why the manual says what it says. That otherwise it becomes a crutch in that it is the standard bearer instead of you being the standard bearer. Take some personal responsibility for your own activities and your own output. That's far more valuable than saying, well, I followed the protocol, I played by the rules. People can say that, but they usually are saying it as an excuse after they fail. Well, I did everything I was supposed to do. I did everything you told me. Like, come on, do what needs to be done. And for that to be so, you're going to have to jettison the crutches. You're going to have to get in there and take that personal responsibility. And there's benefits for that. So one of the areas where that shows up, again, crutches get used in professional relationships. And that is, again, where I was thinking about an event. This is not science related, but it's interesting. I was talking to some bankers, and I mean high-level bankers, a major bank, and I was talking with somebody in the C-suite and another person who was the person who set their interest rates. He was on the federal board. And it was fascinating in the conversation to find out that here is this very important individual that was very much relying on other people to decide when to say yes or no. He loved the idea that he was viewed as so important because he set the interest rate, but he didn't set the interest rate. He leaned very heavily on other people outside of their company too. That was another thing. And yet he was, well, you can see the trap in that. You can rise quite high in your organization and in your stature in the industry by always leaning on other people. But at some point, it's the people that ultimately say, hey, the buck stops with me. They're the leaders. They are the people that get the most respect. They're the ones that move up too, by the way. So they do have to take chances. They gotta walk the wire without a net. It's that. Yeah, I'm reaching for other metaphors, but you get the idea. They don't want to be relying on crutches. It's not a way to establish yourself. It's not a way to develop yourself, and it's not a way to expand, not a way to to have new opportunities offered to you, because you've got to be somebody that's got vision, and vision happens beyond the crutch. So I've been rattling on for quite a bit there, Sarah. So I will pause for a moment and see if there's anything you want to say.
I mean, I think it's interesting what you were saying about the who does the buck stop with, because I think depending on what you're doing, there can be different levels of perceived risk. And I think perhaps the crutches are maybe used in areas of an organization where the perceived risk is higher.
Mm-hmm.
But then the flip side of that would be in research, a lot of innovations and a lot of the sort of the new interesting science comes from making mistakes. And I think, I mean, I said to you recently, Ken, about something that where I'd been checking in quite a lot on some of the things that I'd been doing. And I said, look, I need to do this and I'm going to screw it up. But that's the only way I'm going to learn, is by screwing it up. So I think there's kind of, I think, a point where you need to pull that plaster off and realize that there is risk, but actually, is that risk, is your perception of the risk much greater than the actual risk as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. And the more you can learn the risk you can learn to tolerate, the stronger you become. And I think sometimes we see a failure as, oh, that's an existential risk. Probably not. I mean, don't do anything crazy, but you can make mistakes that are even harmful, right? That set you back. But the learning opportunity is great. Now, I'm not saying set yourself up to fail. There was a lot of talk about that back during the .com days about fail forward. Like, yeah, that's baloney. that's just not how it works. But then again, we're gonna fail. Failure happens. If you're doing anything at all worthwhile, you're gonna fail on occasion, and you gotta be a little tougher. You gotta be able to manage that. And it's not just survive it; it's a gain value from it. What did I learn from that mistake, right? And that allows you to go forward. And you're going to make fewer mistakes with more crutches. It's true, but you're also going to make less progress. You're going to move more slowly, or you're not. There's places you're just not going to be able to go. Yeah, I was for the longest time just proudly proclaiming to everybody that, it's been over 4 years since I had this stroke, and I've never fallen since I left the hospital. Until a couple of weeks ago, I fell just coming in from the back patio. No big deal. I didn't get hurt. Didn't break anything. Except once I hit the ground, well, not hit the ground. Once I was on the ground, I realized I didn't know if I could stand up. I was home alone, and it was late in the day, so I was a little physically tired. Like, well, now what? I had to learn something new. Like, how do I get up from the ground here? Well, first thing I knew is I need to be in a different place in the room than I am. That means, well, I got to get to a different place when I'm on the floor. Now what? I learned a few tools. I got a few places, and I also relied on somebody else. After I got to where I was just about where I could stand up, I had so exhausted myself by the time I got there, I couldn't do it. So I called my neighbor, said, "Could you come over and just help me stand up?" He was there for 2 minutes and he was gone. It was no big deal. And I knew where the limit was now. I knew what happened. I knew why I fell. I knew what went wrong. All kinds of things got learned from that situation. You've probably had the same thing happen in the lab. You're going along with your experiment and it's like, oh my God, what happened? Everything's dead, And I mean, that's the tough thing about biology. You're dealing with living things. It does matter, So, and then you look back and you're like, okay, I see where this got contaminated, and I see what broke here.
Out of interest, Ken, when you fell over,
yes,
do you see that as an opportunity where you want to fall over more by pushing yourself out of your comfort zone more? Or do you see that as a learning opportunity where you now have identified how not to fall over next time?
Yeah, that was more the latter, in that what happened, that what transpired that allowed me to fall? Well, how was that possible? Because I've been going in and out that door for years, almost on a daily basis. What went wrong? Well, I knew what went wrong. I was more tired than usual, and so I could have been more aware in that moment. I realized how I tripped on the transom with the paralyzed foot, which I couldn't feel, but I wasn't paying attention to it, so I knew to pay attention. I also knew that the getting up process, I wasted a lot of energy before I got to okay, this is where I can actually get up. I could get ahead of that. So anyone can do the same thing. And in a laboratory, sometimes you're finding that the reason I'm having this problem is we are not properly equipped here. Well, now I need to ask for resources, right? Or somebody left this this piece of equipment contaminated. That I didn't anticipate that. Well, now, one, I will watch for that to make sure it doesn't happen, but two, I will advocate for, let's make sure that everybody is sticking to a sterile protocol, right? If that is what's effective in your particular lab. And everybody's got their own things. What needs to be done, and what is overkill. So develop your own strength there. Develop your skills so that you know what's what. So the other thing about this is, at the end of the day, you've had crutches for whatever reasons, often for very good reasons. But you don't want to fool yourself with an illusion of safety. Like, this is going to always protect everything. Everything's going to be better with this crutch. It is not better to walk with a cane. It's slower. The cane itself can trip on things. Dogs don't like canes. There's all kinds of downsides, right? So you don't want to overblow the things you have been relying on as being the perfect solution to every problem, because chances are they're just not. And you can be hindered by that dependency, and that's not good for your career development. It's not good for your success day to day in the work you're doing. The other thing too is, you can look at yourself and say, am I overreacting to discomfort or anxiety? Now, those are useful signals. If I'm uncomfortable, maybe there's something to look at. But maybe life isn't 100% comfortable at all times. You need to toughen up a little bit. Anxiety is something that's been, a big deal here lately. I say lately, last several years. Not as much as when I was younger. And there's some usefulness to that. If you're anxious about something, that's your intuition telling you some things. But is your intuition tuned, or is your intuition overreactive? And the crutches that you've been relying on may be part of the reason why that is the case. If I'm walking with a crutch, the assumption might be that I need a crutch. Just because I'm walking with a crutch, isn't that evidence that I need a crutch? Like, actually, no, it is not evidence of it. It's just familiar. So you want to see things as they actually are. And that's one of the beauties of science. Science really does care about what is true, what is provable, what is replicable. And you want that to be a part of your personal operation and your own personal career development. Well, what happens when you do that? Well, you become a master. You become confident. And I'm not talking about overconfidence, and I'm not talking about arrogance here. I'm talking just about, I trust myself. I know I can do these things. I have genuine capability in deep areas that really matter for the work that I do. That's what you're seeking. And we need people like that. We need people like you that are actually good at what you do, because not everybody can do it. And in some cases it's because other people they just can't do what you can do. It's not possible for them. In some cases it's just, well, they've not had the training that you've had and they've not put the time in. But you have had the training and you have put the time in, and it's valuable, and you don't want to be held back. You want to be able to master the things that matter in your world.
I guess the flip side of that, Ken, would be that if you're in a growth mindset, you don't you get confident with one protocol, one technique, one area of your expertise. But then for me, if you want to keep growing, you always need to have that little bit of discomfort and that little bit of stuff where you're not confident. So is there an element of you becoming a master, becoming confident at one thing, and then finding your next thing to remove the crutches from?
Yeah, well, we don't want to be static about these things. This is all about expansion, right? Now imagine you have a certain comfort zone, things that you're comfortable with doing, right? And maybe you are really good at this particular protocol, or using this particular machine, or this particular kit. That's great, but use that to expand your comfort zone. Because your comfort. This is, a lot of people take no responsibility for their comfort zone. They accept that whatever they're comfortable with is all they can be comfortable with. Well, if you put in the effort, if you do the work, if you do the reading, if you take the actions to figure out how to do stuff, your comfort zone actually expands. Now, I can't imagine a better goal than that, to have an expanding comfort zone where you can do more and more comfortably without anxiety, with excitement instead. And then it opens up whole new vistas for you. And it's maybe new vistas in your career. It may be new vistas in scientific discovery. You can change the world. I know that may sound like an overblown statement, but the fact is, in science, so much has been done that changed the world. And it often happened at a very basic level. When somebody figures out something fundamental that hadn't been figured out before, it cascades across the whole scientific community and ultimately touches the whole world. So you're in a very unique spot, folks that are actually working at the bench in science, that many people in the rest of the world just don't have that possibility in their work. And it's not that their work is unimportant or not valuable, but the opportunity for discovery in science is one of the unique and interesting things about it. And you get to participate that. So there's two things that struck me that come from this. You can experience exhilaration, and you can experience empowerment as you expand your comfort zone, right? So all that comes just from building your own confidence, the confidence in your own abilities, in your own understanding. Some people will be excited about the idea of exhilaration. That'll be the driving force. Other people will be excited that it's empowering. And you can choose, right? If one's more valuable to you than the other, great. Some people actually have, there's talk these days that really denigrates power. Like, power is this horrible, greedy thing. No, horrible and greediness is bad. Power itself is not. Power is innocuous in that regard. But power is very useful in a positive way. You can make a great difference if you embrace power. Now, if exhilaration is more enticing to you, fine, go for it. But if you find that I'm drawn to something that some factors of some sectors of society are denigrating. Well, why don't you be one of the ones that takes it back? One of the ones that shows, no, there's a positive way to wield power. There is useful benefit to society in the use of power. You can be a beacon for that. You can be a shining light that shows how that's possible. So now, circling back to where we started, are you still leaning on a crutch? now it feels a little different, right? Now you have more positive opportunities. You can use crutches. In fact, you could actually take on a new crutch now because it helps you do something you couldn't do before. When all I was doing was laying in bed and I couldn't even get myself into a wheelchair, a cane was a leap forward, and it's been so helpful. And you've no doubt done the same things. You've gone into situations you had no idea what to do, and then there was that thick manual of protocols, and you cracked it open, you dug into it, and you learned stuff. And maybe somebody pointed you to it. Maybe you motivated yourselves like, I'm going to go in there and figure this out. And you stood on the shoulders of giants and you move forward. So that's what you can do now. So any closing comments, Sarah, that you'd like to make?
I think it's my take home from this is that there are some crutches that you want to remove in order to expand your comfort zone and empower yourself, if that's what motivates you. But I think there's also the sort of underlying element that I hadn't anticipated coming into this, that are we going to look for other crutches, new crutches, in order to get to that point where you can then remove them. Yeah. So when you move from that tricycle to that that bike with the training wheels, that's a big step. So where can you find your next training wheels or your next crutch?
Yeah, and have the presence of mind to know when it's time to put down the next crutch, and that is how you're going to develop as a scientist. That's how your career is going to expand. That is the path. It's the path everyone before you has taken too. It's what works. So don't be afraid of crutches, but don't be overly reliant either. All right. Well, I'd say that's a wrap for our session today. Thank you for being with us, Sarah. And next time around, I think we'll have another guest host. Nick may be on hiatus for a few sessions, but he'll be back. Don't you worry. So thank you once again, everybody, and be safe out there in the lab and continue to do the miraculous expansions you're doing in support of human health and frankly, thriving of everything living. Thank you so much.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.